One of the things that I love about Sabbath is that Jesus says that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for human beings, not human beings for the Sabbath. The goal of this series, this three-part series, is for us to grow in understanding what Jesus means and receive the beauty of what God intends Sabbath to do for us. And just as important, what Sabbath is not intended to do for us. The simple meaning of Sabbath is rest. And in the Old Covenant, the Sabbath day, Saturday, was a day of rest to remember what God has done, for them to keep on track with having no other gods all the rest of the week. The New Covenant is similar, really. It's a new Sabbath day to rest and remember what God has done, particularly in the person of Jesus, and have no other gods the rest of the week. Here's a good place to start. How Jesus applied the Sabbath. Let's go to the next slide. One Sabbath, Jesus is going through the grain fields, and as they make their way, his disciples, his students, those have said, I want to follow you, I want to learn from you what life is about, what God is about, what life with God is all about. That's what a disciple is. That's what we are. His disciples began to pluck heads of grain. Why are the Pharisees upset that they're picking some grain heads on the Sabbath? Yeah, they're saying, that's work. You're doing work. Oh, you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. Rah, 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 rah. And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Go on to the next slide. Jesus is reflecting on the historical background of the Sabbath from both Exodus and Deuteronomy. And in terms of this application of Sabbath, he's going against what the Pharisees are clearly doing with the Sabbath, which is basically they're saying, we are to serve the Sabbath day. And those of us that do it well, we're good. And those of you that break the Sabbath, oh, not good. Jesus didn't like that. He says, you guys got it all wrong. The Sabbath is meant to be for man, not something that's used against him or that man can use to be against God by saying, I've done my job, you do yours now. Of course, only the people of Israel do this, right? We never fall into the pattern of going, man, I've been attending church every Sunday, even on the days I don't feel like it, and God hasn't answered one of my prayers. We would never do that. Oh, and we would never say, oh, yeah, so they came to church this Sunday. I guess they really felt like it. Hitting home, the Sabbath was never intended for that. That is not what God made the Sabbath for. So what did he make the Sabbath for? Well, it's interesting if we look at Exodus 20, what we call the Ten Commandments. God spoke all these words saying, this is the first word. As far as the Jews count it, they call them 10 words. This is the first word. This is the first utterance of the 10. I'm the Lord your God, who saved you. What are you going to do about that? What did you do for that? What did you do for that? What did you do for that? I'll tell you what we all did for that. Absolutely nothing. When anybody interprets any of the Ten Commandments as a way to gain status with God, they have completely missed the first word. The Ten Commandments are not a test to be able to get an approval rating to get into heaven or get into a good relationship with God. The Ten Commandments are simply statements of fact about what the children of God do. I brought you to me as my children. This is how my children behave. Parents, do your children always behave properly? I love it when people will tell me, behave, Craig. My response is always, oh, I'm always behaving. You didn't tell me how to behave. I'm always behaving. Yeah. This is not about how they're behaving. This is about God saying, I saved you. And so he gives them a bunch of statements of fact about what God's children do. Next slide. And then we get to this one. Now remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy, to keep it set apart from the other days. That's what holiness is, something that's set apart for special purposes. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. Now we got to pause here again. You've been slaves for 4 centuries. You've been living under the demands of taskmasters which 24/7 have figured they could order you around to do anything they wanted. And now this God is saying, oh, by the way, with me you get a day of rest. Is that a good thing? You are not getting it. If all you can manage, yeah, I think it's a good thing. This is amazing. You get a day of rest. What? A day of rest? Funny how they had trouble keeping that, but so it goes. Yeah, it's a credible gift in itself. You get a day of rest. And in the 10 Commandments, what we call the 10 Commandments, it's really interesting. Why? Next page. It doesn't say anything about being slaves. The basis for the 10 Commandments saying, have a day of rest, it's about who you are. It's about who we are. It's about who God is. It says, you're my children. I made you. And when I created everything, I worked 6 days and took the 7th off. So, as my children, take the 7th off. The Sabbath is for us to remember who we are. We are holy and set apart, created in the image of God as his children. And we get to follow this pattern that God has set for us of not feeling like we have to justify ourselves by what we're doing 7 days a week. But we can rest. That in itself, we could explore for about 7 messages and not plumb all of the ways that we sneak out of that one and don't receive all the blessings that it's offering us. But you're doing some of that on your own right now. What's interesting then is when we go to Deuteronomy. So let's go to Deuteronomy. Now, how many of you were aware that we get the 10 Commandments recapitulated in Deuteronomy? Some not. Deuteronomy is fascinating. It's basically Moses' farewell sermon to Israel when he realizes he's not going into the promised land with them. They've wandered for 40 years. This is his last sermon. Want to guess how long his last sermon was? 27 hours. Yeah, if you count up the number of words and estimate your average speaking weight, 27 hours. This is a long message. It's all right. I'll keep it down to no more than 27 minutes, promise. But what's interesting, it starts out the same. I'm the Lord your God that took you out of Israel. So he gets the same thing, right? Same start. Next page. But Moses is basically preaching now in the 10 Commandments. That's kind of way of thinking what's going on in Deuteronomy. He's preaching on it. So he's telling me, remember all of that? And so observe what God told you about it. On that you shan't do any work. But he makes an expansion. Look at the bottom. It's not just about you. Who is it else for? Bottom paragraph. Who else are they to include in this? Everybody in their land, including their own workers. again, you got to appreciate the beauty of what God is offering here. So this isn't just for you. Everybody that you have working for you should get a day of rest along with you. Interesting, now we get the next reason. Moses saying, next slide. Because remember you were a slave? So now he comes back to the recalling, remember you were a slave. Now, of course, basically they weren't. Because 40 years have gone, and all those that came out of Egypt have died. But you see what he's doing here. This is the start of something that the Bible does in terms of, it's a recapitulation, a reenactment, a re-engagement of a covenant that was made with one generation with the next generation saying, this is you guys. I brought you out of Egypt. That's what he's saying. You were slaves. It's a beautiful, beautiful gift of the beauty of the rest of Sabbath. Not just for them, but for everybody in the land. Let's go on to the next slide. God made the Sabbath for man. It's a day for a rest from work, for us to be refreshed. In terms of believers, it's for us to be refreshed in faith in God, in the holiness of creation and the wonder of salvation from slavery. A day of rest to be refreshed, to live in the days ahead and have no other gods. Lots of stuff packed in there. Any questions? Okay, next slide. What is our slavery? We're not under slavery to the Egyptians. What was our slavery that we were delivered from as believers? Slavery to sin. Do we return back to that? It still seems to have kind of a hold on us, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, we're actually not ready to go there yet. You can go back to there we go. Let's just stay there for a little bit. It's also something that it's not just about the one day. Like in the covenant that was about, here's a day of rest in the seventh, it's a day of resting in this wonder of what God has done, getting refreshed in who we are. Oh, we're holy people. We're the children of God. We're not accidents of evolution. We're not the slaves of the world or anyone that puts demands on us. Not even my mom. I was expecting a few more laughs on that one, but don't feel bad. I tried a dad joke yesterday with the family. I was told my delivery was all wrong, but Seth, my son-in-law, said, no, it's the audience. I'm going with Seth. So, not in this case. You're great. Okay. A day to refresh, to live in the days ahead and have no other gods. This idea of a day of rest and living in it is interesting. I was reminded of it as I'm reflecting on this sermon. I walk around a lot. And sometimes when I'm walking, where we live now, I'm walking up and down Fraser, and there's lights, and sometimes the walk lights are fairly infrequent. And I started going, I'm going to miss the walk light. I got to rush. And I rush. But doing this message, I found myself doing something different. I saw the walk light up ahead. Or I could see that, the walk light's going to be coming. I didn't rush ahead. I just kept walking. I just kept resting in the promise that I'm a child of God, that God's got everything in hand. I don't need to rush to this walk light. There'll be another walk light. Will there be another walk light? There'll be another walk light. Do you understand? The concept of resting is not about doing nothing. It's about what we rest from and in. We rest in who we are and what God has done for us. We rest from having other gods. Now, that's another one that we can say, oh, well, I don't have any other gods. Unless you've been through confirmation class and then you were told you did, and you probably went, okay, I know the answer is I did, but I still don't really believe it. One of the things that blew my mind in the New Testament is when Paul identifies coveting as idolatry. Isn't that interesting? He says when we covet things, when we look at what somebody else has got and say, I'm not happy because they've got that, or I'm not happy because I don't have that, saying, you've just made that a god. That's having another god. Other gods are anything that we feel like we have to be fully satisfied. Well, not even be fully satisfied. I have to have this or I can't be happy. I have to have this or I can't be good. I have to. Well, take a good look at that thing, Craig, because that might be your idolatry. Idolatry for those that were living in the Ten Commandment time was pretty obvious. There were idols all over the place. They were literally in their face. For us, it can be far more subtle. It can be the idolatry of fame. It can be the idolatry of being liked. That's a big one on social media, isn't it? I don't have enough likes. Someone's got more likes. All of these things are idols. And the Sabbath, the beauty of Sabbath is to set us free from these things so that we can live fully alive, fully set free for the life that God has for us, a life living in faith in His goodness and power and truth revealed and given to us in Jesus. And so that brings us to Sabbath day that we're focusing on now as a new beginning. We're going to take two more messages to unpack a bit more of this idea of how do we rest and be fully alive. But for today, the Sabbath day in the New Covenant is a new beginning day. On the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb. Why did they go to the tomb on the first day of the week? Which is a Sunday. Why did they go to the tomb on the first day of the week? Pardon me? The Sabbath was over, and what were they going to do? They're going to go work, sure. And what work were they going to do? They were going to take care of the body of Jesus. Later in the book of Acts, we read this on the first day of the week when we were gathered together. And what we see is by now, later in the book of Acts, this has become the pattern for Christians to gather. They would probably have gone to the synagogue on the Saturday, but then they gathered on the first day of the week, on the Sunday, to break bread, to have communion. And so this has become the pattern that we now follow for the Sabbath. The new Sabbath is for us to gather on a Sunday, the day that Jesus rose from the dead, and to break bread. But you know what? This is simply the restoration of a very ancient pattern. In fact, of the pattern from the very beginning, the pattern of the holiness of creation. Because there's something really interesting in Genesis 1. And there was evening and there was morning and there was evening and there was morning and there was evening and there was morning, there were an evening in the morning, and there was evening and there was morning, and there was evening and there was morning, and there was evening in the morning. Are we getting the idea? When does the day start in Genesis 1? It starts in the evening. The day starts in the evening. See, the pattern of Genesis 1 is out of rest, then you're active. This pattern has been reestablished for us as Christians by Jesus in the New Testament. And so we start with a day of resting in the goodness of who God is, and then out of this rest, we live. We live fully alive and free. At least we try to. And sometimes trying is the problem. Let's go to the next slide. Another word for rest is abide. To abide in something is to rest And so that idea of how we go about this is not about us trying, it's about us abiding. And in particular, as Christians, it's about abiding and resting in one particular person named Jesus. Are you seeking to abide and rest and get the peace of your life through another human being? It's not going to work. Are you seeking to abide and get your rest in something you are pursuing in life? It's not going to work. But the interesting thing is, when we start from this place of abiding and resting in Jesus, in his person, in his life, in everything that he has done, it's not just about his teachings. It's about who he is and everything that he has done. When we start from that, when we give our life over to that, when we give up putting these other things first, guess what? That's when we get our life. It's almost like Jesus could have said something, unless you give your life for me, you will lose it. Just a second, he did say that. Okay, we're going to explore that more in the coming Sundays, but for now, the simplicity of this. I need to make sure I get this one right. The goal of Sabbath, to be clear, is not to have people in church. The goal of Sabbath is for people to be made fully alive, fully resting and trusting in God and living out of that fully rest and life, and to do so for the whole week as a witness to the entire land. This is the new covenant, beauty of Sabbath. God has not made you for Sabbath. He's made Sabbath for you to be blessed. God has made Sabbath for you to be made fully alive, fully vibrant and active through the energy of the love and goodness and forgiveness and truth of God that Jesus makes clear. And in this life, it's a process of growing in doing that. And the promise is one day, when we see him face to face, we will let go of everything else that has been clinging to us and we've been clinging to that's been getting in the way, and we will completely and fully rest in the goodness of God, and we will not be strumming harps on clouds. We will be more fully alive. You will be more fully alive than you can possibly imagine. But until that day, I've got a good idea. How about we get together once a week and encourage each other in this? Amen.